Well, back now to our breaking news. French President Emmanuel Macron has now reappointed Sébastien Lecornu to serve once again as Prime Minister. Lecornu resigned just a few days ago after he was on the job less than a month. President Macron had summoned the leaders of mainstream parties earlier to try to work out some sort of deal. He's been trying to win their support, not just for his new prime minister, but also for a budget with lots of cuts that he's trying to push through. Carsten is managing director at the advisory firm Teneo, and he joins me now. Carsten, listen, I mean, Lecornu, his first time around lasted a month. Now he's back. How long? I mean, is this a lasting plan for the French government to keep it stable?
Well, whether it's a lasting plan, that's really a long-term question, and long-term questions, of course, in French politics these days are difficult to answer. Look, the goal is to make it, first of all, to Monday, which is the deadline for presenting a first draft for the budget so that France can have a 2026 in place before the end of the year. What happens beyond that is a different question. I think Macron has seen that political parties in parliament are not too keen, at least the centrist parties, not too keen on early elections. And he's basically telling them, well, then, you know, you're giving my prime minister, Lecornu, a second attempt.
Can he get this budget passed?
Yeah, I think it looks as if he's going to be able to get a budget passed. But what we're going to see is that the big trade-off is that the cuts that you were referring to earlier are going to be slimmer, less brutal, if you like, than what had been discussed in the past. And the prime victim here is pension reform. Pension reform, of course, this flagship project of Emmanuel Macron, something that's extremely unpopular among centrist political parties. And it looks as if Macron has to continue climbing down on this, basically.
Yeah. I mean, beyond that, it's not particularly popular in the French public, is it? I mean, could we expect protests once again if the budget were to make it through?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we have seen obviously major protests against the pension reform in the past. That was the reason why the government, Emmanuel Macron's government, basically back in the day pushed this through without a specific vote in parliament. There's a tweak in the French constitution that allows you to do that. That made the reform even less popular. I think what we're going to see is a budget that might go as far as putting that pension reform on hold, perhaps until the next presidential election in 2027, in order to make sure that there is political support in parliament. And you were referring to protests in the street to prevent the repetition of those protests.
So the big question is, and that of course is part of Macron's fear, right, is that he might not be able, he and his party might not be able to hold off the far right in the next election. How big a concern is that?
Yeah, that's the big concern that's looming over everything right now in French politics. That is also the reason why centrist political parties were really not too keen and were intimidated really by Macron's threat of going to early elections. So in the short term, it gives him even a little bit of a leeway, you could say, as he's trying to push centrist parties into at least tolerating a government that manages to get a budget on the road. But you're absolutely right. The big spectre hanging over French politics is really that standoff, not just between the far right on the one hand and the far left on the other side. So this hyperpolarized scenario, that's really the big fear of centrist political forces in the run-up to 2027.
Carsten, thanks so much.